Evictions, not a fun topic. Um, you know, it is a daunting, convoluted process in Massachusetts with a lot of nuances that can affect any timeline, any outcome. There's just so many different things that can happen. And I think, I don't know, sometimes I wonder if they make it this way because they think it's in the best interest of the tenants, but it really I don't think it always works out that way because now you're making landlords very skittish and people who may have taken chances on other people to give them housing may be more apprehensive because of how daunting the eviction process can be if it goes wrong. So I don't know. You know what I mean? It amazes me too how different the eviction process is from state to state. There's some states that I've spoken with property managers, like I think Wisconsin, for example, a tenant doesn't pay 5 days, their stuff's on the curb, they're out. That's probably a little too extreme, but I'm telling you, so our goal as a property management company is to try to avoid this process at all costs, right? Because it's not good for the tenant and it's certainly not good for the landlord, you know. So we accomplish that a few ways, right? Number one, when we put tenants into a property, we do have a rigorous screening protocol because we try to just eliminate this up front if we can. I'm not going to put you in a situation as a tenant where you can't afford the apartment, because that's just setting you up for failure. That's setting up the landlord for failure. So there's the upfront screening, taking our time, picking a tenant that has the best opportunity to be successful in that apartment, right? And then throughout the tenancy, as things come up, we work hard as the property manager to mediate disputes, to try to avoid disputes, to help people on payment plans if they're falling behind, and to really work with people because it's not good for the tenant and it's not good for the landlord if we have to go down this path. But in a nutshell, we got the blog here, kind of this, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. All right. This is me doing this stuff for 14, 15 years now. I've dealt with a lot of these things as a property manager and as a landlord. And, so this is kind of like a summary of kind of how the process works. All these dates are subject to change. Um, you know, there's so many different things that can happen on both sides that could delay this process, expedite this process. At the end of the day, the best solution is number one, avoid it at all costs. Number two, if you find yourself heading down this path, work out an amicable outcome between you and your tenant, or as if you're the tenant, you and your landlord, to try to go your separate ways and just move on. But in a nutshell, okay, it all starts with the notice to quit. Okay. And that's why it says if the tenant won't quit, you must evict, right? So that means, and it just means you got to go, right? So a 14-day is non-payment of rent. If the tenant pays it, you're done. The process ends. All right. If they don't pay, then we begin the court process. And then a 30-day is for other reasons. Could be no fault. The landlord wants the apartment back, could be for a lease violation, whatever it is, but it's not really 30 days though. It's one rental period. So if your rent's due on the first of the month and I give you the notice on the second of the month, it's not the 31st or the first, it's really the end of the following month. And a lot of people don't realize that. So if I give it to you April 2nd, it's not April 30th, it's May 31st if your rent's due on the first. Right? If I give it to you March 31st and your rent's due on the first, then it's April 30th. So, 30 days is a loose term. Okay. So what happens? The tenant doesn't leave at the end of that period, right? You're notifying the tenant, I want you gone at the end of this 30-day period. If you don't pay your rent, I want you gone after 14 days. They never leave, right? I shouldn't say never, but they generally don't. Now you got to file something with the court, right? So now you're telling the court, hey, I asked this person to leave. Here's the notice I filed. I'd like them gone. Okay. If your notice isn't good, you may have to start over, right? I've seen that happen. All right. So then you file with the court. The court can take a few weeks to give you even a court date. So now if we gave this to this person March 31st to get out April 30th, they didn't leave April 30th, Takes a couple of weeks into May to file a court date. We might not see a courtroom till June or July. Then we go through the court process. If they don't delay it, if they don't move the court, if the judge, whatever, it's all up to a judge or a mediator. If we end up in housing court, that could take time. Could be August, September. Then we have to wait. So we can't even move them out until an execution is issued, right? When the court says, okay, this piece of paper gives you the legal right to move them out. That takes a couple of weeks to get sometimes. Bam. Now we're like August, September. And, maybe this person hasn't been paying this entire time. This is why screening is so important up front, right? And then once you get that paper, you can't just go there and throw their stuff on the curb, right? So you have to hire a constable to put a 48-hour notice. Then you need a bonded moving company. You got to pay for storage. There's just so many steps, right? I've seen these things take 3 months. I've seen these things take 3 years, right? And it's just not a pleasant process for the tenant. It's not a pleasant process for the owner, for the landlord. So really at the end of the day, it's imperative that as an owner, as a landlord, that you have good processes, right? You have a good screening system up front, that you pick the tenants that are going to have the highest propensity to be successful. And if that tenant is not successful, or if something changes, you got to keep the emotions out of it. Okay, because it's just human nature. You get emotional, the tenant gets emotional. What could have been resolved with a simple conversation and some kind of compromise ends up being, a year of your life. And, it just turns into craziness. So, my advice as a property manager, hire a property management company like us to just manage your day to day, because we don't have emotions in this. We're not invested like you as the landlord. We're not invested like the tenant, that this is their place to live. We are just an impartial, professional party that is here to manage the property and try to avoid these situations at all costs. You know what I mean? And everyone feels like they're right. No one feels like they're wrong. It's like any other dispute, right? I mean, it is what it is. At the end of the day, though, the landlord owns the property. So at some point, the landlord is entitled to get possession of their property back, and there's some things there, a lease, a tenant at will, whatever, and the tenant has a right to quiet enjoyment of the property that they rent. So both parties have rights. You know what I mean? So it's a sticky situation, guys. So definitely, again, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. Just sharing some stories of situations that we've encountered and kind of where our mindset is and how we handle it. All right. So hopefully this blog is helpful and it kind of shows you the path generally of what is ahead. And hopefully, we can avoid that at all costs. All right. So if you're a landlord and you're worried or you're concerned about this, reach out. We'd love to help and see if we can help you avoid this process, or if it's too late and you're going through it, or you're about to go through it, then we can help you as well. We have great attorneys that we work with, and they deal with this every day. All right, guys, good luck. Work together. Try to avoid evictions at all costs. Landlords, tenants, avoid it at all costs. It's not a good process for anyone. All right, take care, guys. Thanks.